Hello, I'm back. This is my third post of the day. I know that my legions of dedicated fans will be sick of the sight of me. This is my third post of the day. This isn't a post about poetry or about politics. It's actually a post about the law and the application of the law. I'm actually in Hong Kong at the moment. I spend quite a little time in Hong Kong, and I'm posting on this topic because it's particularly interesting for me. By day, I'm a corporate lawyer. I don't only write poetry and rant about politics. I need to pay the bills, and corporate law is my bread and butter. So any legal matters that are in the news or are exercising public opinion, of course, interest me, both personally, professionally, and also intellectually. If you're outside Hong Kong and you pay attention to news and current affairs from Hong Kong, you'll realize that there's one matter that's exercising local public opinion very rigorously, and that's modifications, amendments to Hong Kong's extradition laws. What the government has proposed is two amendments, amendments to two ordinances. Now, in Hong Kong, an ordinance is the city's law. What in the United Kingdom and the United States would be an act of Parliament and an act of Congress, respectively. In Hong Kong, these ordinances are under the purview of the city's legislative body. This is the Legislative Council, or Legco, as it's often called locally. Hong Kong is a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China. This has been the case since Hong Kong's return to Chinese sovereignty in 1997. Prior to that, Hong Kong was a British colony for around about 140 years, and its legal system is still grounded on the English common law. And what the British and Chinese governments agreed prior to the handover of Hong Kong to Chinese rule in 1997 was that they would establish a one country, two systems principle. This is the foundation stone of Hong Kong's autonomy within the People's Republic of China. And the principle is that Hong Kong is an inalienable part of China, but that it operates under a separate system from that in the rest of China. It maintains a high degree of autonomy in a large number of areas. And the law, in addition to differences in culture and language, is perhaps the most obvious area in which these differences can be seen. Now, what is exercising public opinion in Hong Kong is that the government has proposed changes to two ordinances, the Fugitive Offenders Ordinance and the Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters Ordinance. What these proposals essentially propose is that Hong Kong has negotiated treaties with the People's Republic of China, of which Hong Kong is a part, but a semi-autonomous part, and Taiwan, to aid in the extradition of individuals who are accused, have been accused of crimes. The government's proposal is largely based on the argument that so far, in certain cases, it has been almost impossible to extradite individuals who have been accused of crimes. And the government's position has been strengthened by a very sad case of a very brutal murder of a Taiwanese citizen by her boyfriend, a Hong Kong citizen, and he was unable to be extradited to face trial. So the government is using the argument of very serious criminal offences having been committed to bolster its argument. The reason that this particular issue is causing such rigorous debate in Hong Kong, and there's in fact going to be a large demonstration, a large march against the changes to the two ordinances I mentioned on Sunday, this coming Sunday. There have also been other small-scale demonstrations and formal opposition from professional bodies in Hong Kong, for example, the Bar Association, which represents Hong Kong's barristers. For anyone who's not familiar with the English legal system, the legal system, our legal practitioners are divided into solicitors and barristers. Although there are other things that separate them and differentiate them from one another, the principal difference is that solicitors represent their clients in any legal matter and are usually and often the first point of contact in any sort of when any legal advice or assistance may be required. A barrister is usually the legal professional who appears for an individual, either, well, in whatever capacity it may be in a court of law. It's very common for a party to retain the services of both a solicitor and a barrister if a matter has to come before the courts. What's exercising public opinion in Hong Kong very strongly at the moment is that many people in Hong Kong feel that these changes to the two ordinances I've mentioned are potentially going to weaken the rights and protections of any citizens in Hong Kong who may not have committed very serious offences or may not have committed offences at all. They may be subject to suspicion, or they may be subject to political censure in other parts of Greater China, and may not face and receive a fair trial upon extradition. Hong Kong already has extradition treaties in place with 20 countries, including the United Kingdom and the United States, and these treaties offer a mutual assistance and mutual recognition of the extradition regimes and are accepted by the people of Hong Kong. The difficulty is not every country in the world has the same respect for the rule of law and for the rights and principles that underpin it. Not every country in the world recognizes the same rights to due process of law and a fair trial. And not every country in the world accepts that expressing an opinion that may not be palatable or may not be favorable or may be critical of another party in itself is not a crime and is not an extraditable offense. So many people in Hong Kong are very concerned about this. They fear that this could open the door to perhaps malicious use of the extradition power, political use of the extradition power, when under the rule of law, under the principles that Hong Kong has operated, because it has inherited these principles from the English common law, everyone is entitled to a fair trial, is entitled to the protection of the law, and any prosecution of an individual should be for legally grounded, legally justifiable, judicially testable reasons, not for political reasons. The principle in the English common law system is that the judiciary and the legal system are independent of the state, of political interference. That's not the theory that underpins, for example, the mainland Chinese judicial system. In mainland China, there is no principle of the separation of powers. The powers of the state, be they political, legislative, or judicial, are essentially indivisible. So this is a matter of great public debate and public urgency in Hong Kong. I'm not going to make any comment on the legal, judicial, legislative, or political system in mainland China. What I would like to say is that it's incumbent upon the government of Hong Kong. It is a semi-autonomous government. The government of Hong Kong does have to pay attention to the central government in Beijing, which is the sovereign government of Hong Kong. But Hong Kong enjoys semi-autonomy under the one country, two systems principle. It's important that the members of Legco, the elected, and Legco members, Legco is what local Hong Kong people call the Legislative Council for short. It's important and it's incumbent upon legislative councillors to remember that they cannot legislate without the support of the people. They represent the people of Hong Kong. It is for the people of Hong Kong that they have negotiated this treaty, and they are proposing amendments to the two ordinances that I've mentioned. They cannot do this if they don't carry the people with them. A system cannot operate against the opposition of the people themselves. Now, unfortunately, the chief executive of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam, the chief executive is a similar position to, for example, the Prime Minister in the British system, the local head of government. Unfortunately, she has dug her heels in. She has very obdurately, very stubbornly made it very clear that the proposals are not going to be revised, are not going to be weakened in any way, and if it is possible, a vote on the proposed changes will take place before the Legislative Council recess, which begins in July for summer, against effectively universal opposition. Now, it's important, as I said, it's incumbent upon members of Legco to recognize that they are legislating for the people of Hong Kong. Legislators who pass laws that are in direct opposition to public opinion are creating great tension and are potentially undermining their legitimacy, potentially undermining the legitimacy of the law itself, in addition to weakening the rights and protections of any person who may be accused and may then be subject to an extradition request. Now, there have been proposals that have been put forward to temper, to limit the powers and to limit the scope of the extradition request. It's incumbent upon legislative councillors to consider these suggested amendments. It's incumbent upon legislative councillors to remember that the rights of the individual have to be paramount, have to be before all other considerations. Consider the suggested amendments. Amendments have been suggested, for example, the number of crimes that could be the subject of an extradition request could be further limited. Whatever the limitation may be, whatever the protection may be, to ensure that the powers are not abused, that they are subject to full legal and judicial control and review, and that simply because a person is accused of having committed a crime, the principle still remains the case in law that that individual is innocent until proven guilty. Simply because a person has been accused of a crime, it does not follow that they have in fact committed that crime, or that they are suspected at law of having committed that crime. That is a matter for the police, but then for the courts to determine, is the suspicion warranted on the balance of probabilities? And then, in a criminal matter, beyond reasonable doubt. So, I urge the Legislative Council, each member, regardless of the party that they represent, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of any other extraneous influences or elements that they may take into consideration, to consider only this: the protection of individual rights, to ensure that any extradition request that is made is lawful and recognizes the rights to due process and protection and the presumption of innocence, whilst also limiting the crimes that could be subjected to an extradition request. It may also be important to consider whether or not such crimes, such accusations, should be tried locally. If an extradition request is made, the option should be there to consider whether the crime can be tried locally. Of course, there are many other protections, many other limitations that could be put in place. It's incumbent upon legislative councillors to exercise their powers, their prerogatives, and their public office carefully, wisely, and in consideration of public opinion. To ignore public opinion, to perhaps even one could go so far as to say to hold public opinion in contempt, is going to delegitimize the Legislative Council and to further turn the local population against the Legislative Council. And that is not a recipe for a peaceful, stable society. So I urge Hong Kong's legislative councillors to think very carefully, to give due consideration to the changes that are going to come before them, and to consider limitations and controls on the prerogatives and powers that will be given to the extraditing authorities and to the police in the best interests of all the people of Hong Kong. Okay, that's all for this evening. I'm really quite tired now. I wish you all a good night. Peace out, and I'll see you next time.